Last year, several of my family members, friends, and colleagues contracted a relatively new disease called chikungunya. It starts with a fever, and for several weeks after that, there are symptoms like muscle pain, joint pain, fatigue. And currently, there is no known cure for this disease. There is no specific treatment plan, and things can get complicated really fast. Pakistan's extreme heat waves combined with extreme rainfall created conditions that basically helped these vectors, the Aedes mosquitoes, to grow and transmit diseases like chikungunya, dengue, and the Zika virus. And diseases like these are likely to become the new norm in a changing climate. So every moment of every day, we humans are reconfiguring the world's climate bit by bit. Sometimes there will be abrupt shifts in climate patterns. For example, the melting ice sheets can lead to rapid sea level rise by several meters, which in turn can impact the monsoon seasons, and we're very close to some climate tipping points. In 2024, there was a study published in Nature, which said that within the next 20 to 40 years, we might see the Amazon rainforests, which are currently a net source of carbon absorption. So they essentially absorb greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and store them. These might turn into a savanna state, where the trees start dying en masse and release all of that stored carbon back to the atmosphere. The year 2024 is set to be the hottest year on record, surpassing even the 2023 records, which was the warmest year since we've been tracking temperatures since the early 1850s. This is really scary stuff, right? And no one's really talking about it, we're not taking it seriously enough. And even if we were to stop all fossil fuel use today, there's already an amount of heat locked into the atmosphere, which means that by the end of the century, the temperatures will continue to increase by 2 to 5 degrees Celsius, at least. So I've been working in the climate space for the last 15 years, probably around 10 people who've consistently stayed in this space, and I just briefly wanted to share my own journey with you. So I grew up being very close to nature, watched a lot of Lion King on repeat, and Mufasa's message to his son Simba about how we're really all connected in this great circle of life. I think that's really the basis of all environmental problems and sustainability. I was lucky enough to get into Princeton for my undergrad, and I decided to major in civil and environmental engineering with a certificate in environmental studies and public affairs. And I believe this kind of background really gave me a solid foundation for several different roles that I held later in life. So back in 2005, scientists were still trying to convince politicians that climate change is real, that it's actually happening and it's caused by humans. But the Bush administration at that time completely denied that climate change even existed. They would cherry-pick science to suit their policy agenda. They would suppress studies that they didn't like. And the fossil fuel lobby, along with climate skeptics, worked together to cast doubt in the minds of the general public, people like you and me. 20 years later, 2025, the world has changed drastically. Unfortunately, we've already exceeded the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature threshold, which we've defined as the upper limit to avoid catastrophic climate change. Again, this is really, really depressing stuff. So in 20 years, we haven't really managed to do a lot. We've started talking about it a whole lot more, but talking, I think, is not enough at this point. So in Princeton, I was lucky enough to meet Professor Denise Mosrol, who was also my thesis advisor, and she had successfully tackled the ozone depletion problem. This is slightly before your time, but in the early 1980s, late 80s as well, ozone was a serious issue. The ozone layer is essentially the shield that protects the atmosphere, the Earth, from the harsh UV rays of the sun. And because we were using a lot of CFCs or chlorofluorocarbons, which are found in aerosol sprays, like used to be found in your deodorants, your air fresheners, your air conditioning gases, these would travel up into the atmosphere, and because of chemical reactions from the sun, they would essentially destroy or deplete ozone. And two scientists realized that this was a human-induced problem, right? And the ozone hole was getting bigger and bigger every year. Now, if this had continued to happen, millions of people would have contracted skin cancer, gone blind due to cataracts, or even suffered from autoimmune diseases. This is around 40 years ago. The world came together to sign the Montreal Protocol, which was the world's most successful environmental treaty to date. And at that time, the scientists were able to garner support from the public, from the media, convince governments to take action, and successfully managed to shrink the ozone hole. And by 2040, it's supposed to be completely healed if we continue on track. So this is one of the big climate success stories that I think really keeps you going amid all of this gloom and doom around climate change. I mean, it has been done in the past, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do it again. After graduating from Princeton, I worked for a year at Masdar in Abu Dhabi, came back to Pakistan the following year, and joined Engro Corporation, which used to be one of Pakistan's largest corporations. At that time, climate change was not a priority for the corporate sector, but in 2011, there were massive floods that hit Pakistan. A third of the country was underwater. These were, I would say, around the same intensity as the ones we saw 2 years ago. Over 100,000 people were displaced, large tracts of land were inundated, and at that time, Engro Foundation decided to work with the government to set up a climate-resilient model village in Istanbul. This is near Kotadu, south of Multan. So I had an opportunity to work on this, and this was one of the early examples of public-private partnerships for climate resilience. And of course, now everyone's really talking about it, but this was one of the very initial projects that was undertaken by Pakistan to rehabilitate some of these people who'd been displaced from the floods. A couple of years later, I went back to the US, got a master's in environmental management from the Yale School of Environment. They've changed the name now. It used to be called the School of Forestry, and they felt it was too hippie, and people weren't getting good jobs. So it's now been renamed as the School of Environment. And I got a master's in environmental management, and this time I returned to Pakistan again and essentially tried to apply this policy skill set to another national emergency, which is polio eradication. Pakistan, unfortunately, is one of 2 countries in the world where polio is still endemic, the other being Afghanistan. And I was working at that time as an advisor to the Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and over the course of a couple of years, we managed to get polio cases down to 0 in Pakistan for 1 year straight. And just for your background, a country is declared polio-free if 3 years pass without a single polio case being reported. So in 2022, I was in Islamabad at that time, and I hosted Bill Gates for his first ever visit to Pakistan to commemorate this very important milestone. We had this celebration, and the momentum was going strong. But in 2022, a lot changed in Pakistan, and due to circumstances beyond our control, shortly after that visit, the first polio case resurfaced after an 18-period month of 0 cases. This was a humbling experience for me personally. I've been working on this, for 2 to 3 years with some of the brightest minds in the country. Tanya Idris was also part of this. Later, she joined the Digital Pakistan Initiative. And it was just very difficult, I think, to see all of these efforts go back to square one. And unfortunately, we are now today back to the beginning of our fight against polio. I think the cases are over 60 again this year. So I think at times during the course of your professional careers or academic careers, you will face setbacks. Sometimes these are unforeseen circumstances with limited ability to influence them, but it's important to look ahead and move forward. So I returned to Karachi, set up 0 Point Partners. It started off as a team of 4 people, 2 of them were from your school. And alhamdulillah, today we've grown to a team of around 15 people, including some part-time consultants. And the idea really was to enable Pakistan's transition to a green economy. So we started off with a couple of projects. One was from an international partner in the UK, and then the CEO of Unilever Pakistan. Maybe some of the parents work there, I don't know. He was the one who really gave us our first chance to, our first project. And that kind of catapulted a series of, positive events for us. And now, we were working pretty solidly in the space, right? So we're working now with the government, with the private sector, on access to climate finance. We're advising them on carbon markets and also helping develop Pakistan's climate adaptation capacity. So climate change is, of course, it is the defining challenge of our generation. On the side, I'm also serving on the board of the Global Youth Leadership Center, GYLC. And our mission is to mobilize the youth of the Global South, so countries south of the equator like Brazil, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Pakistan, of course, that are disproportionately impacted by climate change. And we're hosting our third, climate summit in Brazil in April. It's a hybrid summit. I encourage all of you to attend virtually, if not in person. The idea really is to mobilize the youth who are currently living through the impacts of climate change to, essentially use their voices to advocate for climate action, hold leaders accountable, hold your adults accountable, because of course they haven't really done a lot in the last 20 years, and really take ownership of your future. So that's really our mission, and I would like to use today's opportunity to encourage all of you to just start doing 3 things. Use only what you need. It's very basic. But essentially, if you're living within your means, that's all really that all of us need to do. Second, of course, use your voice. Physically speaking is great, but you have social media, you might be good at writing, you might be, a performing artist. Any platform that you have, use that to advocate for climate action and to collectively kind of work with other global south countries, because no country or individual can do this on their own. And finally, make conscious choices. We have power in terms of what we buy, what we eat, how we dress. Every action collectively can have an impact. And that's really what happened with the ozone story as well. The public refused to buy products containing CFCs, right? So your purchasing power has a lot of impact. And that's really just the message I wanted to leave you all with. Thank you so much.